So I have a few questions here, and of course, in the meantime, others may bring in questions. Just type them in the Q&A panel and send them to all presenters. First question, I think this is for Peter. You mentioned that the stepwise approach was new to auditors. In the training, you said that this was a relatively new part. Did they generally consider that renovations would have to take place in one go? Is that their usual expectation? And did they consider that also homeowners would have such an approach?
No, this was not the main point. Most auditors were used to usually look just for the next renovation step, no matter how much this comprises. So either a whole renovation or just specific components of the building. They were not used to look further ahead, so further than maybe 3 or 4 years. Whereas the renovation roadmap points to 30 or 35 years ahead, and that was the new point. We explained during the training why this stepwise approach was so important for us, and certainly the main point was that most renovations are done stepwise. So only if one component comes to life's end, then it's renovated. The other thing, a whole renovation, is much more seldom.
Okay. One complementary question to this: was the principle of the best possible solution well accepted? I mean, this goes beyond the cost optimal, where perhaps auditors might be used to going, and also for homeowners it might not be ideal financially.
This is exactly the crucial part of the whole thing, that on the one hand we have to go climate neutral, and on the other hand homeowners at the moment are sentenced to invest for this, and the auditors are those who bring the bad news, and of course they identified this crucial point very, very quick. Nevertheless, they created many roadmaps that led to very, very high efficiency, so efficiency classes like A and A+. The good thing about it is that you don't have to reach this efficiency in one step, so you can spread the investment over a long time, and that makes it more easy for the homeowners and also for the auditors.
Okay, good. In the example shown by Julia, in the Portuguese building, some roadmaps show a very high improvement. I think also the example that you focused on, Julia, was such. I think from F to A+. So is this something which we see often, to have such let's say such low-hanging fruit in terms of building stock that is very problematic, but is possible through such improvements to reach such a high level?
Yes. For example, in this example, the Portuguese auditor, he first insulate the whole building. He make insulation for the facade and for the roof, and after he used a lot of environmental energy for the heating system. So I think it was a very, the start was very bad because the building was not insulated and the heat system was, I think, in coal. So you can have with small steps, small changes of the buildings, a very high efficiency. And this we could see it often in the building. So, for example, the Portuguese renovation roadmaps, they was very ambitious with their renovation measures.
Okay. May I ask a complementary question to this? In your experience, at least from these countries and also possibly from Germany, is there a possibility for bundling several such buildings together? I mean, do we see buildings that are very similar to their requirements? Or, I mean, of course, the building renovation roadmap is an individual building renovation roadmap, but I'm looking a little bit from the outside perspective of municipalities, of regions, of investors, banks, etc. Do you see the possibility of having several such buildings together that could comprise one united energy investment?
That's absolutely possible, and that's what can be done. So if you are not a private investor, but if you're from municipality and manage a whole building stock, like a portfolio of buildings, then of course you will have many buildings that are maybe not even twins, but are very similar. They always require similar solutions. So, of course, it's possible to use one renovation roadmap for more than one building. On the other hand, we orientate very much on the life cycles. So, if the buildings are built at the same time, then it's okay. But if one building is younger, you really have to translate to another life cycle or lifespan of components. Because, of course, the best moment to renovate one component is when it has to be done anyway. That's the most cost-effective period. But of course, yes, many buildings are built at the same time and are very, very similar, so they can use the same roadmap. Yeah.
I think you actually partially answered one of the next questions, which is if the life cycle cost is a driver for the determination of the optimal solution.
Yeah, it's an approach. Of course, you can say if you renovate one component earlier, then you start to save energy cost earlier. So it's not necessarily combined with this life cycle of the component. It doesn't have to be. And of course, it's sensible to combine certain building components even if they are not expired. So, for example, windows maybe should be changed when the walls are insulated because it's much easier at that point. But this is an individual approach. You really have to see the building and of course the owner and his ability to invest.
Yeah. I think actually that is a challenge in a much broader industry, not just construction. That it's we can say that of course we want more energy efficient cars. But replacing a car means taking out of use a resource which is expensive, a lot of material, a lot of energy has put into that, and then I mean replacing a car which is 2 years old, for example, for an electric one. Of course, it's much better to use the electric car, but there is also waste in resources. So. If I understand correctly here, you're saying that you have several such questions with the life cycle of the products and the elements of the used in a building. One can say, of course, you can replace it earlier, but at the same time, it represents an investment which goes way back, even at even a relatively new home, let's say a home that is not more than a decade old. Might have, I can think of various instances where it can take a lot of improvement.
Yeah, and that's exactly one thing we had to learn during the last 10 years, maybe. I think 10 years ago it was always the best solution, or regarded as the best solution, to renovate a building as a whole. So you don't have problems with thermal bridges, or you don't have problems with air tightness because you can manage all this in one go. And of course, you start saving energy from that point. And still many auditors or many fractions argue in the same way. But we have learned that about 80% of the renovations are not done like this, because homeowners, either they are not able to invest that money, or they really say, okay, I don't want to renovate my roof now because it's only been done 15 years ago. And of course, it's very practical, and usually it's cheaper to use the roof until the end of life cycle and renovate when it needs to be done anyway.
Okay, very good. Let's go a little bit into the actual solutions that were proposed. Did you see, regardless of country or specific auditors overall, let's say a turn towards prefabricated solutions or ethics, or let's say things that are perhaps easier to install? Or did the auditors go, let's say, deep into the various components in order to achieve the best result for the specific building?
I couldn't say that they really went for prefabricated solutions. It was more like, I would say, usual insulation materials, but they liked this idea of having U-value classes. So really to say, okay, I go for the best U-value that might be there because of this best possible principle, and not to stop with 6 or 8 centimeters of polystyrene, but maybe choose a better material or really make it thicker, and really to point at this best possible building solution in the end. So, and of course they used renewable energies.
And especially they use, you can see it, for example, in Portugal, they use a lot of wood. So we thought maybe it's like a regional thing, that they have a good wood store, so they have an easy way to use sustainable energy with the good primary energy factor for the heating system.
Mm-hmm.
But at the end, it was, I think, every renovation roadmap was an individual choice with individual measures, and no prefabricated.
So you're saying that it's a little bit also of a cultural thing in terms of the usual building materials in the country, or perhaps aesthetics, or this kind of other, let's say, complementary specifications, let's say, that are in the minds of homeowners. A question here: how did the comfort, the aspects of comfort, you mentioned them, they are a part of the roadmap. Did you see that these play an important point in choosing, perhaps in terms of the owner preferences, to choose specific solutions, or perhaps to invest a little bit more in order to have the same technical solution, but in a better way that it provides more comfort, perhaps?
Yes. So we have 2 options to insert comfort levels. The one was for the logbooks, where you can see the energy auditors, they didn't use it so much. But in the renovation roadmaps, we have like different aspects of comfort, for example, aesthetic. And there you can see the energy auditors, they checked the comfort symbols, and they tried to improve the measures, like to give the best comfort status. So you can see from each renovation step, the comfort level get higher. At the end, for example, at the first renovation step, they just improve the aesthetic of the buildings, and we get a health symbol. So they try to make the building so good, so the comfort level get rising, and so I think the energy auditors use it a lot. And we thought that because we suggested in the first visit, the energy auditor speaks with the homeowner and they explain, okay, you can make a few measures and then your comfort level rises, and we can see it in the roadmaps that they did it.
But you could really see that the comfort assessment was something they were not really used to, because it goes beyond this technical approach and saying maybe it's too clear for them to mention, to say, of course, your thermal comfort will rise if you insulate the building. But really have a systematical approach to this and really say, okay, tell the owners, it's not only about energy and saving money, energy cost, it's also about improving your building and improving well-being in that building. And it's maybe, if you do it systematically, it gets more clear. Maybe they always did it in their work, but if we really look at this, and if you have an icon and prefabricated text blocks for this, it really gets more clear. And I think they really had to get used to this way of thinking.
Mm-hmm. Okay, very, very important point. Additional question, going back to the aspect of costs. Is the methodology of cost optimality, as per the EU regulation 224 of 2012, could this be a common base of evaluation?
That's a hard question. At the moment, we are fighting against, we see that cost optimality and the climate target are not the same. So we are looking for suited instruments to close the gap between cost optimality and climate target. So for us, cost optimality is not really not that important. We really say, try to do it as good as possible. Again, not as good as possible, no matter what it costs. Of course, this should always be the roadmap of the owner, and the owner has to really determine what the roadmap is about, because it's his roadmap, and he needs to want to follow this roadmap. Otherwise, he will not renovate his building in this way. So it should be maybe a balance of what the owner is capable of doing and what he's supposed to do in order to reach climate targets.
I think here we can add also a significant advantage of the stepwise approach in the logic of future-proofing buildings. So first of all, as iBRoad as a research project in implementing at the pilot level some approaches, it seems we have additional, let's say, leave. We have more freedom to do things that perhaps at the regulation level in the future might not be precisely as that. But we have the possibility of testing and suggesting roadmaps that might go further perhaps than the regular roadmaps. However, I think what is important is to stress the stepwise approach. It means that we can say, okay, the ideal building would look like this, making all the possible improvements, the best possible improvements. It doesn't mean that you have to do it all now. But future-proofing means two things. One, that what you put in will be a very good performance even, let's say, after 15, 20 years. It will be a very good solution. And on the other hand, that what you have put now does not impede you to do the other steps later to avoid the lock-in effect. So I think for this, the cost optimal solution is as you said, it's something that is in many cases not compatible with the climate ambitions that are now on the table. And at least through the stepwise approach, we have the possibility to implement a lot and to plan to implement a lot. in being much more ambitious than we might have been if we said, okay, let's do the best that we can with the money that we have now. Of course, that poses a lot of restrictions in practice. Going back to the aspect of comfort, we have an additional question. If we assess comfort, the comfort issues with a specific software, I know the answer, but Peter or Julia, you might want to elaborate more on that.
With the software, we had this, we thought of that. Is there a way of really assessing or evaluating comfort levels? And we decided not to follow this approach. The thing is, we have so many aspects of comfort. So it's on the one hand thermal comfort, and there are evaluation methods for that. But on the other hand, you have like sound comfort from aesthetics or indoor well-being, and well-being is something very, very subjective. And of course, if you have a scheme to evaluate this, you have to compare how much is health worth maybe compared to thermal comfort. So you have to weight them, and there's no such system, and I don't even think it's sensible of building up such system. So what we do is really, we say in one step, here your well-being will improve. Not how far or how much, not to a certain level, but only it will be better than before. And that's the information we can give. And also we can say, of course, if well-being improves, the same with thermal comfort, because some benefits are related. So we can add as many multiple benefits as we like to one step. It's not only one, but it's only on or off. There's no scheme behind it.
Okay. We could add that, of course, in future improvements of roadmaps, additional information can go in the same way as in the logbook. There is the possibility to add additional parameters, and of course, in a full deployment, to have interconnections with softwares and other such tools that might be there. Going back, you mentioned a little bit the subjectivity of some of these points, like comfort, for example. Another barrier that was mentioned, of course, is the aspect of language. Of course, it's not the intention to have a renovation roadmap and the logbook that is in English for all countries. It was just for the pilot testing. But in practice, from your discussions with the auditors, apart from translating let's say the terminology, did you find any major obstacles in transferring the software to other countries? I mean that, for example, there is a completely different way of measuring or showing the various classes of buildings, the energy classes of buildings, or in practice, since everything falls under the umbrella of the PBD, there is a good compatibility and a potential for translation and transfer even to other countries.
Yes, there's a certain base that's valid for all member states, and this is how we build up this whole thing. We say, okay, what fits for all member states and what has to be adapted to work in one certain member state. That's not only the language, of course, because some countries don't measure in kilowatt hours. They don't have euros, for example, so all this can be adapted. What we also adapt are the colors of the energy efficiency classes, so they really fit with the colors of the national EPCs. So homeowners are not confused when they look at their energy class. It has to be really the same as in the EPC. So worst case would be the EPC says A and the logbook says A+, So they were very confused. So this is exactly the same and also the same color code. And we have an implementation roadmap, you can say. So if a member state wants to implement these tools, we have certain steps to take and say, okay, we need your class boundaries, we need your color codes, we need maybe text blocks from you that we can insert. Of course, we need the translation, but this is something that's very, very organized or systematical, and yes, we can offer that to every member state.
Very good. I think a very positive close to this presentations and discussion. I don't see any further questions, so I believe that we can close the webinar at this point. A reminder that it has been recorded and it will be made available next week along with the presentations in PDF form at our website. A request to everybody who has watched this to join in our news alert if not already subscribed, to follow our website. There's quite a lot coming up for the next 3 months until the end of May when our project ends. And hopefully, of course, much of what has been produced in this project will be taken up and used in other countries and in other contexts as well, beyond also single-family houses as we worked on. And I mean, there's a lot of work to do in terms of renovating the European building stock. And our overall logic in the project was precisely to follow an open approach, which could be combined with many other solutions that are proposed and are being worked on at the moment. So thanks again to everybody for joining us today. And hopefully we'll be in touch. And don't forget, there's another webinar coming up. We'll announce it soon, and it will take place in March. Sorry. Thank you very much. Thanks to all.
Thank you.